Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Welcome to Blogging Heads. This is your first time on Blogging Heads, so we're very excited to have you. You are Rebecca Watson. I'm Ann Althouse, a regular Blogging Headser and blogger, law professor at the University of Wisconsin Law School. But we want to hear about you, so tell us about yourself.
Well, I started Skepchick at skepchick.org. That's probably what I'm most well known for. It's a site on it's about science and skepticism and feminism and snarkiness, and I write there as well as I've got about 15 other women and one man because you have to have a token man in there just to balance things out.
What kind of man gets into an environment like that? I mean, how did he possibly break through?
The only man I could find who could hold his own amongst 15 strong women. No, it's my friend Sam Ogden. He's a great writer and a good friend of mine. And so when I was adding more writers to the site, it was only natural for me to ask him. So he fits in well. He's really great on the site. So
now go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to say, your name came up. I mean, I noticed you. I guess I don't follow. I follow religion and politics kinds of topics, and I'm interested in science. And I'm very fond of the Skeptoid podcast, so I guess I sort of have an idea of what the skepticism movement is about. But what's the difference between skepticism or the skepticism community and just science and being rational and so on? Isn't that sort of a more general orientation that people have in the modern world? So what's special about being in the skeptics community?
Yeah, that's a good question. Skepticism, to me, is science that's applied to your everyday life. It's science applied to everything. I should say the scientific method applied to all those things. A friend of mine, Tim Farley, who runs a website called whatstheharm.net, describes it as, if you imagine a Venn diagram, I think with science on one side and consumer protection on the other. Skepticism is where those two things overlap. So a lot of what we do is, for instance, investigating the paranormal or investigating scams and frauds to try to help people not get conned.
So it's sort of about trying to develop the average person's thinking so that they're not played by various New Age schemes and as well as traditional religions and all sorts of other non-religious kinds of phony beliefs that people somehow fall in love with for ridiculous or emotional reasons.
Yeah, religion definitely falls under the heading. You know, any group that makes, or any group or person, I should say, that makes a claim that can be tested scientifically is, to us, open season. So a lot of religions make claims like that. And yeah, it's basically just about giving people the tools they need to sort out fact from fiction, because it's very easy to fool ourselves. You know, not just very easy for me to fool you or something like that, but for me to fool myself. And that's why, you know, I got involved in this through magic. I used to manage a magic store, and I was interested in people like Penn and Teller and James Randi. And as I got more into it, I realized that these magicians were involved in the skeptical community. There are a lot of magicians who are involved in it because they have this acute awareness of how people get fooled, and they see people like Sylvia Brown or other so-called psychics using basically magic tricks to lie to people and to take their money and to, you know, sort of abuse their emotions, to take advantage of them. So magicians get involved often in that regard because they realize that they can help expose these magic tricks in the hopes of helping people not get conned.
Obviously, it's a scientific question itself, how the human mind works and why we see things that aren't there or believe things that aren't right. It's part of human psychology that we're drawn to the things that we're drawn to and that we're fooled by certain things. And obviously it's part of human interaction that we develop skills with respect to getting people to do what we want them to do or getting what we want. We kind of exploit that all the time. So it's sort of part of human life that we take advantage of some of those, I guess, mistakes that people make in their perceptions and their judgments.
Yeah, and that's why you see overlap with magicians as well as with a lot of psychologists who get involved. To give you one example, my friend Richard Wiseman is both. He's a magician and a psychologist, and he is very popular amongst the skeptic crowd because he specifically looks into things like optical illusions and fun ways that we can learn about how our brains can trick us. And I'll give a plug for his new book, Paranormality, which is just fantastic. And it's a really great introduction into skepticism, skeptical topics. It's a good overview of the different topics we tackle.
I really like that as an idea for getting children interested in science. A lot of children shun science and think, art or creative things are more worth their attention than science. But a lot of kids are interested in magic and in optical illusions and things like that. And as an entree into science and developing a science-based view of the world, seems like a good way to involve children.
Yeah, it's fantastic for children, and kids have a sort of natural interest, I think, in science and in learning and in curiosity. And so for me, even bigger than it attracting children. I mean, to me, that's what got me into science as an adult. When I was a kid, I loved science. I was really into it up until about high school age. And I just, at that point, I completely lost interest. I wasn't very inspired. My teachers, were teaching just out of textbooks, and I felt like what I was learning was simply rote knowledge, and I sort of lost I lost the thread of what science really is, which is about discovery and learning more about our universe. Of course, I have plenty of scientist friends right now who work in labs as their everyday life, who are just shaking their heads and going, "You have no idea how boring science can be." But but to me, I lost that inspiration in high school, and I didn't get it back until I got interested in skepticism. And the way that went was sort of an interest in cons and hoaxes, and then an interest in bad science, because we talk a lot about things like perpetual motion machines and pseudoscience. And from there, I sort of learned about the flip side of the coin, the good science. What do we replace these sort of delusions with? Well, if we previously believed in a 6,000-year-old Earth, why not replace that with a universe that's vastly more inspiring and wonderful and terrible than a 6,000-year-old Earth could possibly encompass? So through that channel, I got interested in what science is actually doing for us, what good science is doing for us. So I think skepticism it's kind of a gateway drug to science.
And it almost sounds like a sort of PR for a sort of PR branch of science, where you're sort of making it fun to be a certain type of person who relates to other people in a certain sort of a way that is kind of cool and socially advantageous. We do. I think a lot of people within the skeptical community do a lot of science communication, which and you find a lot of science communicators coming over and learning more about the skeptical community. And I think it's a great time for people like us, where I think it's kind of cool to like science these days. Maybe I'm just overly optimistic. Well, it seems really important when you have, for example, Oprah being so popular, especially Oprah, but I think there are other people like that. You mentioned Sylvia Browne, typical Oprah type guest, right? Making it alluring in a way that, in addition to the way traditional religion brings people in, that there's something alluring about these various New Age schemes that people want something to be interested in, and if they're not interested in science, this is just a cool thing to do with your human mind. Getting interested in this, even if it's false. We have to be interested in something. We have to pay attention to something. We have to serve our emotional needs with something. And so, and I think Oprah especially really milked that whole aspect of the human mind for obviously immense commercial benefit on her part, but really exploiting some vulnerability in the human being that I think does need an antidote that's equally entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, Oprah is the anti-skeptic. I recently called her the Kevin Bacon of pseudoscience because every branch of BS has been on her show or promoted by her at some point. For instance, the law of attraction. Are you familiar with the law of attraction? It's not a scientific law.
Yeah. What is that?
It's okay.
Is that the one where you think about something and then you get it by thinking about it, or something like that? Do I sum it up?
That's it. That's you summed it up.
Is that the secret?
It's the secret. Yeah, it is the secret. And the idea is that if you want something from the universe, you just act like the universe has already given it to you, and then you have it, which is just one of the most vile philosophies I have ever heard of, because it essentially is victim blaming as philosophy. Kids with cancer, they just didn't hope hard enough. It's just. It's a really awful thing, and yet,
on the other hand, you can occupy your mind with it at a time when you might otherwise be just completely depressed. So similar to a religion, it gives you some way to keep your spirits up, even when the truth is really dismal. People need something in that place besides just the harsh reality. If the scientific truth is your child is going to die, what are you going to do with your mind?
Right, and that is a very compelling argument, but to me, it's not actually true, because what you're doing is you're giving people false hope, and the false hope might carry you through to a certain point. But what happens when that hope falls through? What happens to the person who, for instance, limps out of a faith healer's, big revival, and throws away their medicine, and months later they're not better? Who talks to them then?
Right. And my hypothetical, the child was certain to die, as opposed to there actually is a treatment and you're delaying getting it, or you're not getting it, and obviously that.
Well, even so, let's say that your child is 100% certain to die. Which do you think is the healthier thing to do psychologically? Is it healthier to accept that fact and to take measures to deal with it psychologically, to prepare for it? Or is it better to pretend as though the universe is going to come through in the end, save your child, and you'll live happily ever after? I would say the former. I think that people who are selling
that's kind of a belief of yours, that the actual scientific truth is healthy. I mean, the word healthy is an interesting word in that context, isn't it? I mean, if you're saying what's healthy and all you're talking about is how people manage their emotions, why is it healthier to keep your spirits up with the truth as opposed to falsity? If the only issue is how do you live, how do you get through the next day when things are horrible?
Well, the friend I mentioned previously, Richard Wiseman, has actually done a few interesting studies similar to this. One in which he looked at how people, whether focusing on an end goal actually makes you more likely to achieve it. And this isn't exactly relevant to the exact situation that you've brought up about a child who you're going to die, but I think it's relevant in that what he found was that people who focus on just the end goal, more often than not, never reach the goal. Those who focus on the steps required to get to the goal actually can get to the goal. Yeah. So, simply having hope that everything will work out in the end, to me, there's demonstrable proof that it doesn't help. You could say that, well, this helped me in my time of need. It helped me to pretend that, for instance, my child was going to live. But to me, there are better ways to do it. There are better ways to offer people that help. There are science-based ways. There are therapies that people can go to help. I don't support giving money to liars and charlatans in the hopes that maybe it might help someone at some point.
Yeah, I hate the idea that people are making money out of lying to vulnerable people. But at the same time, I think that an individual trying to live through difficult times doesn't necessarily have to face the truth. For example, you could listen to beautiful music. Beautiful music is something that could keep your spirits up. It's not really true or false, but it might be effective.
Well,
I mean, there is a placebo effect. There's I don't know what you think of meditation. I think there's some phony science about meditation that's designed to sort of funnel government money into people who teach meditation. And one one of the things I'm really concerned with is alternative medicine and the way with the new healthcare reform, people who do alternative medicine are trying to get in on the money by presenting some kind of, I don't think it's appropriate scientific research, but they're making a political argument that they should be included too. And so wasn't there a study that had to be withdrawn and was then still reported about the benefits of meditation? Did you see that?
Possibly. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to.
There are ways of getting money. One way is to sell a book and go on Oprah and get vulnerable people to believe in it and just pay you for the book. But another way is to get the money, the government to start paying for these treatments, or get insurance companies to pay for treatments that aren't real treatments. They're just things that unleash the placebo effect.
There's a lot of bad science out there when it comes to studies that are being sponsored by people who stand to benefit from them, and they, regardless of how good the study is, if it gets out particularly into the popular media and reported on as true, well, then that company benefits. And so alternative medicine can be very tricky in that regard. There's a joke that I'm not sure who the first person to come up with it was. It might have been Tim Minchin, but what do you call alternative medicine that works? Medicine.
Well, I mean, because that's a joke that should be discovered independently by every comedian that starts to try to write about this subject. There should be there should be nothing called alternative medicine. Does it make sense to say that? Except in the one way it might make sense is that the placebo effect is real. That can be scientifically shown. So if you can bring out these things that regular doctors aren't allowed to use, it's unethical. But yet it's real. So how come, if we can't use it, let's bring in the meditation instructor, and then we'll actually get the placebo effect.
Well, yeah, there are plenty of things, like you mentioned music, you mentioned meditation. These things can have real positive effects for people. What we try to guard against is people making claims that aren't supported. So claiming that these things can heal cancer or cause any healing other than simply sort of lifting up your spirits, making you feel better, just in a general sense. Because when we allow people to start making claims like that, then we have people who are issuing actual science-based medicine in favor of things that are only going to make them more ill. So it can be quite a serious problem. If people are interested in learning more about alternative medicine, I recommend Simon Singh's book, Trick or Treatment, where it's great, especially from a beginner's standpoint, or someone who's just not already associated with the skeptic movement or whatever. He opens by talking about one of the first clinical trials, which was the attempt to find what was causing scurvy. And it was done on a ship by splitting people up into groups, giving this group apples, giving this group limes, this one fish, and this one nothing. And the group with the apples got a little better, the group with the limes got a lot better. They didn't know the mechanism behind it, but they knew that something in the limes was really great. Something in the apples was sort of good. And what would we call that today, this idea of using fruits and vegetables to treat disease? Well, alternative medicine tries to claim that for their own. But that's not alternative medicine. It's medicine because it's been proven to work.
Right.
So, a lot of people think of medicine, particularly those who subscribe to the idea that alternative medicine is the way to go. They think of science-based medicine as pills and, the big pharma, all that, but they miss the fact that it's proven to work, and that's why we are trying to encourage people to use it.
Yeah, it's funny the way people make some judgments about what they should be doing based on who is making money. So if a certain kind of big corporation that they have a kind of amorphous idea about, if they're producing pills and making billions of dollars, that must not be good. But if someone else is able to project a natural or somehow quasi-religious aura about them so that they seem like they're a small operation when they may be raking it in too, that somehow people feel drawn to that. So people are making kind of emotional or even political judgments about where they want to get their treatment. I think that's really sad. I mean, I've known people here in Madison, Wisconsin, who would pick their doctors based on their politics. He has good. You ask someone for a recommendation for a doctor, and you have to be careful they're not giving you a recommendation based on the politics of the doctor.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people complain about big pharma. Well, I hate big pharma. I used to work for a progressive organization that was fighting big pharma to improve Medicare to include prescription medication. I think that, you know, big pharma as a conglomerate is vicious and awful, and we need to keep a close eye on it. However, you know, the people who are pushing vitamins, the people who are pushing homeopathy, they are making millions of dollars. They are not small mom and pop operations that we can trust simply because of that.
Well, Whole Foods sells an awful lot, has a big homeopathy section. I mean, I love Whole Foods. I like to buy my food at Whole Foods, but some people have said you shouldn't shop at Whole Foods. We're going to talk about a boycott that you instigated in a little while, but some people say you ought to boycott Whole Foods because of the way they sell that homeopathy stuff. You shouldn't associate yourself with something so evil. Yeah. And I really think that marketing the homeopathy, selling nothing for what is it, like $20 for a tiny bottle of nothing.
Yeah, and let's just spell it out real quickly for people who might not know, because I didn't know. Back when I worked for that progressive organization, I thought homeopathy just meant natural, you know, herbs, whatever. But what homeopathy actually is sugar water, because it's based on the idea, two ideas. One is that like cures like. So, for instance, if you get poison ivy all over you, the cure is more poison ivy. And the other is the what's it called? Someone is listening to this right now and shouting it out. It's the idea that the more you dilute something, the stronger it gets. And I'm not misrepresenting their arguments. You can look this up. These are the two principles that it's based on. So instead of just rubbing another poison ivy leaf on your wound, you make the poison ivy stronger by diluting it a little bit in water, and then you take a little bit of that and you dilute it in more water, and you get to the point where there are actually no atoms left of the initial substance.
Yeah. And do they even bother to go through the process, or do they just go ahead and just put water in there? Because why would anyone know the difference? Why would they waste their time going through? Do they? And I mean, is it a fraud if they say they've done that and in fact they didn't do it? They just put water in the bottle,
right?
Or since we know if they did it, there would only be water in the bottle. They might as well not bother to do it.
Exactly. The end result is the same, so they may as well not bother. But I would
like to
think
if there was some kind of a fraud, consumer fraud action brought against those people based on the fact that they didn't bother to do the thing that they knew darn well wouldn't have any effect anyway.
Yeah, I think somebody should go undercover at a homeopathy factory and find that out.
They're just filling it up at the tap.
Right.
Okay. Now I mentioned that you have this boycott that you started, so I want to not tantalize readers too long on the subject, because a lot of people maybe first saw your name or were reminded of your name when this incident occurred, I guess a month ago. And I'm very interested in this because I'm interested in the way things go viral on the internet and the way some little thing, I've had it happen to me. So I'm interested in your experience. I'm empathetic with it, I guess, up to a point, not with everything, but that some little thing happened to you, that you presented it as a small part of a larger blog that had a lot of other stuff in it. And I don't know whether you thought it was going to be a big deal. It seemed to be just a tiny little thing. And it got huge on the internet. So you had this whole, I call it a vortex. You had this whole vortex around you that must have been awfully weird. So I'd like to talk about that incident and work toward the how it went viral and how that felt to you and so on. But it all started, you were in a foreign country, which I had to look up to see what it was. It was Ireland. It's not really a very threatening foreign country, is it? I've never been to. Actually, you were in Dublin, right? And were you at a Skeptics convention?
It was an atheist conference.
An atheist, and why do atheists? I mean, I understand why religious people get together at a conference, but why have a conference of atheists? Why don't atheists just move on? Okay, there's no God, so what? Do something else then. Why do you have to congregate over being an atheist?
I think some atheists like these conferences for the sense of community and the social aspect, or just for the sort of back-patting, aren't we so smart sort of thing.
Well, then why do you go? So what's the learning for you?
to me, the important aspect of these is the focus on secularism, of political activism, of protecting rights for atheists, and keeping religion out of the government. And so that's what I was thinking I was going to go and talk about. But what I actually ended up talking about was my own experiences as an atheist communicator, because someone else at the conference, another woman, had spoken about how she didn't think there was any sexism in the community because she had never experienced it.
And what's her name?
That was Paula Kirby.
Paula Kirby.
Yeah, she's a writer and a thinker who lives in England. Okay. And so she, who I've admired in the past. I've read her articles and I really liked them. But she was voicing an experience that was very different from mine, and she was, I think, using it as her evidence that no problem with sexism existed in the atheist community, that it wasn't a big deal, that most of the people at the conference and in general at these things are men. She didn't see a problem with any of that. So I had my time on stage, and the topic of my panel was communicating atheism. So I spoke about what it's like for me to communicate atheism as a woman, and particularly as me. I pointed out that, not everybody has my experiences. Paula Kirby obviously has not, and that's great. But I have had some really negative experiences, and I spoke about some of the hate mail I get, not just from believers, but from atheists, how those atheists tend to focus on rape threats and things like that when dealing with me, and also the fan mail. Sorry?
You dropped out for just a little second there.
I'll start that sentence.
I thought it was losing you altogether. No, I just lost like 1 second. But now, so this is sort of like the sociology of the active atheists. Obviously, there are lots of atheists around there who don't go to conventions, don't participate in any of the politics of atheism, and whether there's sexism in that context or whatever, you're saying that within the community of people who publicly speak and polemicize or whatever about or activist about atheists, that within that context, within the sort of sociology of that movement, there is sexism, and you want to be the one to point that out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be the one to point it out, but nobody else was pointing it out. So
would you think they were in denial about it, or they were just saying it's a distraction, let's not tar our people as being sexist? It's those people in traditional religions who have the problem with sexism. We're the enlightened ones, so let's just presume we're pretty much at the equality level and put the spotlight on something else. Let's not, I mean, if you're talking about PR for atheism compared to other alternatives, why give it a bad name? Why not act like we're the enlightened ones and minimize maybe the little remnants of sexism that might appear? But you want to say it's actually a problem. And I'm wondering if it's something about the kind of men that's attracted into atheism, especially activist atheism, that there's something especially misogynistic or especially kind of overcompensating in the masculinity department, or what's really going on there?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that. I don't think that atheists in general are more or less sexist or misogynistic than the greater population. I think that what you've got is a community that is mostly men, and when you have that sort of environment, men tend to minimize women's contributions, or overstep bounds without really thinking about it, making jokes without really thinking about them. And I don't think it's a conscious decision on their part to bat down women. I think it's just one of those weird human psychology things that just happens.
So do you think it's
but that doesn't excuse it.
Do you think that some of it is that atheists are kind of smug about being smarter and more enlightened than other people, and as a result they think they can dip into maybe some jokes that would be sexist coming from elsewhere, but we're all in the know, so we can actually do things like that, be a little edgier?
Well, there are some smug atheists out there, but I don't think they really quite compare to the smugness that I've seen from people in religions who think that they're so right that everybody else is going to roast in hell because they're wrong. So
yeah, well, that's a different kind of smugness. But
well, no, I think it's all together. It's this idea that you've got the right answer and everybody else is wrong. I think that's where that's what we're talking about when it comes.
But
to
in
smugness.
traditional religion, people are more likely to be submissive to a certain sacred tradition or book, and they're kind of putting their selfish desires aside, or ostensibly that's what they're purporting to do, and being one with this tradition, that they're kind of putting their maybe judgment and separate test of the world aside to embrace a given tradition, whereas the atheists are saying, we've figured out that we've used our minds and we've risen above that. So, I mean, there is kind of an inherent intellectual pride about doing that, isn't there?
To me, if religion were about putting aside your own selfish interests, then I don't think that the history of religion would so closely mirror the self-interests of the men who are at the head of those religions. You know.
Yeah, I don't mean to suggest that it is. I just think that the mental state that people may believe that they have and want to portray to the world to gain favor within their group would be one of submitting to the great tradition or to the word of God, et cetera, where as if you're in an atheist community, and I've never gone to an atheist convention or anything like that, so I don't really know, but I would think that there would be a sense that, we're scientific, we're using our minds. I've read, Dawkins' book, a Hitchens' book, that kind of a thing. So I think that there's an intellectual arrogance about it that is put on the surface and portrayed. In other words, everybody might be arrogant and power-seeking in what they do with religion, but it seems to me that maybe among atheists, it's more the outward manifestation that is acceptable and part of the norm, so that might cause people to maybe think they could overstep some lines because it's understood that, we're the smart people, we're tough mentally, and so on.
Well, some of the things that I have heard, particularly since this whole thing blew up, but also prior to this, is the idea that we are rational and rational people aren't sexist, therefore we are not sexist. So, yes, I think that the idea that atheists are rational people is being used to excuse it, and skeptics as well. This is, I think it's important that we distinguish that these are two separate groups with a whole lot of overlap, skeptics and atheists. But, you've got some famous atheists that are, completely insane when it comes to critical thinking. They're not critical thinkers at all. For instance, Bill Maher, who has in the past said that he's not an atheist, I think, but he received an award from Richard Dawkins just a few years ago for being world's greatest atheist or something. He believes that the government is trying to control our minds or something through vaccinations. He doesn't believe in vaccinations. So, amongst other things, he's a big alternative medicine fan.
Yeah,
so
he certainly reeks of smugness. I mean, that's his sort of comic style. So, but I would think that people who like Bill Maher and so on, especially males, might think that they're exuding this charming, smug, arrogant attitude. Other people, the religious people, are stupid, and that might somehow leak into a kind of male posturing that females might be irritated at. And I kind of heard you saying something like that the men are dominant within the atheist community, and often, if you have a competitive community where everybody's trying to be dominant, nobody really wants to listen to someone say, look, you need to hold back and let me succeed because I'm a woman and it shouldn't be dominated by all men. So, tone it down, step aside, and let me rise to the top. I don't have to do the usual competition. I should get some affirmative action so that, women are represented too. And women aren't willing to do this kind of aggressive, competitive posturing for position within a group.
I think that I don't think anyone's actually asked for something along those lines, and I've heard that sort of, maybe not exactly how you've put it, but a sort of straw man position along the lines of saying that I want less qualified women to be given the stage over more qualified men. And that's not true at all.
But I didn't put it that way. What I said was, if there's a certain type of male behavior that is fighting for dominance and being aggressively competitive, and that's a kind of a male behavior that women aren't socialized to do or whatever, that then if you see all of these panels, everybody that everyone knows, it's the same group of men all the time, there's something defective about that group, and they need to respond by being proactive about getting women included in the group. They need to understand what they're doing, or they need to be actually pushed back with the kind of feminist argument that I hear you making, that they need to see their competitive behavior as being misogynistic or sexist or patriarchal. And they ought to apply their minds to understanding that and being self-critical, and that they should see the male dominance within their group as something that is a problem that they should care about solving in a scientific way.
I'm not, it's interesting to think about it in terms of competitiveness, because I have spoken in the past about how we do socialize women to be the nurturers and the compassionate ones, and not people who are, who we encourage to stand up and point out someone else's wrong beliefs, which is really what this is about. It's what skepticism is about in one respect, is to have the guts to say, I think you're wrong. And so, yeah, as a society, we do have trouble doing that. I think that is an issue. I think that another issue, though, is just the fact that it's a self-propagating problem, in that you've got famous men at the top of it, and conference organizers want the famous people on their stage so they can sell more tickets, so they get the men, and so the men get more and more famous. So what I try to encourage people to do is, particularly at a local level, there are a lot of smaller events like Skeptics in the Pub events all around the world, encouraging them to seek out interesting women who are just as qualified as the men, but might not be as big a name. And they're not as big a name because we haven't given them a chance yet. So give them a chance, put them on stage, let them show what they can do. And to the larger conference organizers, give them at least a small slot up on the stage. Put them on a panel, something. And I think it's working. I started whining about this about 5 years ago when I really got into it.
Let's get to the sort of core story so we can move out from that, or we'll take the whole hour and we won't get to it. Okay, so you were on this panel and you were talking about this problem of women within the atheist movement, and then there was an incident in the elevator that I want viewers to hold on if you don't already know what it is about it. So get us to the point where you're in an elevator and there's just a moment there where something happens that then becomes this internet meme about feminism. So get us to that point.
So yeah, my entire talk on my panel was about the feedback I get, the sexual feedback I get. And then for the next, 10 hours or so, I held forth at the hotel bar with a big group of people, and the sexism problem was the number one topic of conversation all night long. And they were fantastic. It's just a great group of people.
So they were receptive to what you were saying.
They were very receptive. Yeah, even people who hadn't thought about it before, were asking questions, were getting involved. So it was a really great environment. And then I excused myself to leave at around 4 a.m. I said I was exhausted. I was going to bed because we had another day of the conference the next morning. And so I excused myself and I went to the elevator, and a man came and called up with me and got onto the elevator with me. I had not.
Can I just say, if that happened to me, I'd get right off the elevator. I wouldn't go up in an elevator alone with some guy that especially went out of his way to get in the elevator with me. I'd go like, and act like I forgot something and get out of the elevator. I would just be out of that elevator. I wouldn't want to be trapped in an elevator and late at night with some man.
I've heard a lot of people say that, and I've always been dumb about those sort of things, I guess, in that I guess I just always expect the best of people in general. And
isn't that funny? Because then you get accused of thinking, all men are predators and all of that. But only because you waited too long. I mean, if you were really hyper alert, you wouldn't have gotten off the elevator as soon as the guy made a point of getting in with you.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So what happened was, we get on the elevator together, and he turns to me, and I hadn't spoken to this person at all directly. He was in the group that was at the bar.
So he heard you holding forth all that.
Yes. Yeah, okay. He was there. But he hadn't said a single word to me prior to this. So he turns to me and says, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I find you really interesting. Would you like to come back to my hotel room for a cup of coffee?"
And can I just ask you, there's no chance that was a joke? In other words, you had just said, "I don't like this sort of thing," and then he goes out of his way to say it. I could imagine in a certain kind of delivery environment, a facial expression, that was supposed to just get a big laugh.
Yeah, I have a pretty good sense of humor, I think, and that was definitely not a joke. So,
and can I ask you what he looked like? Was he big? Was he old? Was he good looking? Was he someone you would never go out with?
Well, he was, I guess, maybe in his early 50s, not overly large, but bigger than me. And besides that, I have face blindness, so I'm not very good at describing people later.
Oh, really? Interesting. So you can't read expressions on a face. You can't tell
I can.
emotion.
I can read expressions. It's just that I can't describe them to you later in terms of facial. I can't draw them.
So is this like a learning disability kind of a thing? Is this the one where you can't recognize people when you see them?
Yeah, it's prosopagnosia. I can't it's not severe. If I meet someone a few times, I can get to know who they are. But
so you need to have other markers for how to tell who people are than just what their face looks like. So
I like people with weird hair and glasses.
Please wear a distinctive hairstyle and a "Hi, my name is Bob" sticker.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So back to the.
So do you feel vulnerable because of that? I mean, in a situation like this where you have some you're not quite sure who the person is in some situation.
I so very rarely feel vulnerable that to me that's just it's an alien emotion. But I suppose that there was, I mean, it made me very uncomfortable, particularly because I had been speaking nonstop about rape threats and that I get and things like that. And I should mention that those come from fans as well, fans who are trying to compliment me, but do so by describing in intricate detail what they would like to do to me sexually if they ever got me alone. Well, I get these sort of emails all the time.
Personally, I ended up marrying someone that I met through my blog. So, and I think there were a lot of maybe men who were interested in me in a way, but could never find a way to ask me out, go out with me, get together with me. And, the one person that did, I'm now married to. But so I just thought, obviously, this guy in the elevator used a bad technique that was so bad that you made a blog about it. And as an example of, look, guys, this is not the way to do it. Because it's too resembling of things that properly flag your flight or flee. I need to get out of this situation. This might be one of those bad situations. Doesn't necessarily mean all men are predators, but it means I'm stuck in an elevator with somebody. This might not be good. I need to start thinking about my exit strategies. So, but what I want to ask you is, assuming that presumably there are lots of guys who would love to go out with you, who are interested in you, and you've given them a clue of don't do that. What could they do? What's the right way to do it?
I think every partner, every boyfriend I've had for the past 5 years has probably come from the skeptic community, has known who I am in some way, has been at these conferences. So, yes,
because part of the reason to go to a conference would be to meet people and actually find people to have love affairs with or whatever.
Right. And that is fine. But so here's the thing, I, in these situations, I can walk into a room, into a pub full of men, get hit on, have a good time, and not worry about coming back next month. But, over the years, I've received these emails from women or, women who have approached me at conferences to tell me these things that they can't do that. They walk into these situations and they feel a great deal of vulnerability. They, for instance, get hit on one after the other because one woman to 30 men, that's, 30 times she's getting hit on in a night that she has to reject and then come back the next month and see all these men who she's just rejected and feel like crap. She's going to feel really awkward and exposed and vulnerable. And, so I listened to these women, and, I didn't get it on a personal level until the past year or so, when I think my popularity online has gotten big enough, I guess, that now I'm getting harassed so much that I get it. I completely get it. I get how annoying it is and how uncomfortable it makes you feel and how unsafe it makes you feel. So what I try to do is like, these women that tell me these things, they don't have the platform I have. I have a platform where I can send out this message to men, which I thought was fairly nice. I made a YouTube video where I said, I gave this example of the elevator guy. Yeah, and
except I do think at the end of it you mentioned people were sexualizing you and that there was a lot of misogyny in the world. I'm maybe not getting that exactly right, but I think you used the word sexualizing or objectification.
I did use the word sexualizing.
And sexual. So I think that might have set off certain signals that are confusing to maybe your central message. I think your central message was, a lot of you guys just don't have good technique. You need to, when you're trying to do something, you're a good guy, or you think you're a good guy, who this woman really ought to want to go out with, but you need to be more aware of when you're making your approach that you might be setting off her signals that she has to have to save herself from the 1% of situations in which the guy isn't a good guy. It doesn't mean that the feminist thinks the men are all predators. It just means that a smart person walking down a dark street at night needs to see everybody standing around as a potential robber. I mean, it's just a normal way that human beings relate to the world. And so if you want to approach somebody, you need to do it in a way that doesn't touch off those signals. I thought that was a really good message, that I don't see why you got this pushback. But you did put a little bit more into it, a little of the feminist jargon that I think set some people off in a different way.
What I said was that I had just finished speaking about how I don't like it when men sexualize me in that manner. And I was speaking off the cuff, but what I was trying to say is, making me feel unsafe because you want to hit on me, because your gratification is more important than my feelings. I had already expressed my desire to go to bed, to be left alone. All night I had expressed my desire to not be hit on, and yet this person's gratification was more important than what I already
He did say,
stated.
Don't take it the wrong way, so that shows interest in your feelings. And no, maybe not enough.
The opposite.
No,
I think what it shows is him excusing what he's about to say. I think it's the same as saying, I'm not a racist, but I think
it shows a little concern. It could be less concern. At least he thought about you as a person with a separate will and so. But also the fact that he made it coffee. Obviously, a lot of people got on your case because you said all he did was ask you to come to his hotel room for some coffee, and there was a lot of talk about whether that's a sexual invitation or not. Which, I mean, he did at least couch it in a non-sexual. You have an out. It's just coffee. Isn't that some kind of a website? It's just coffee.
It's just coffee. Dating? It was a Seinfeld episode. I'm baffled as to how anybody could hear that and not assume that it was sexual, because the bar was serving coffee. There's no reason why the two of us have to go.
It's a way of saying let's meet for coffee. It wouldn't be in the hotel room at 4 a.m. Of course, that's absurd. But normally the idea of let's meet for coffee, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Gives you a kind of a social. Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that the fact that this guy thought of the coffee idea, even though it was in the wrong context, shows some concerns that he wasn't just the most blunt brute in the world. He was trying to do it right. Now, your podcast showed, I think, your good advice to men that's not good enough. You need to do something more. So back to the question I asked you a few moments ago was, if someone wanted to do it right, what could he do? I mean, maybe one thing is never in an elevator. Or wait until she gives you some smiles or cues that she thinks you're attractive before you. I know some men don't ever approach women in real life. They only do it, through writing or an email, and that any kind of and so I'm a little concerned that this blow up over this incident that you wrote about and that got everybody going, and I still want to talk about how everybody got going, that it's kind of getting a message out to men that you can't talk to women. You can't approach women. There's this whole thing that women have that you'll never figure out. Don't even try. You think there's a great woman and you'd like to approach her. Don't even try, because it's just fraught with danger. You're gonna get tagged as some kind of a sexualizing oaf, and it'll never work. Again,
that's the sort of thinking that
afraid to approach women. So
I think that's the sort of thinking that really infuriates me, because and here's the thing: if you don't see, if the general you, if you a man out there don't see what the problem is with approaching someone in an elevator at 4 a.m. after she's already expressed a desire to go to bed and not be hit on.
Okay.
If you don't understand why that's not a good time to hit on someone, then don't approach women at skeptics conferences. Don't do it. I'm quite happy telling men to not do that, because my job isn't to get men laid at these conferences. If men want to get laid at these conferences, then they should put forth the effort to understand what's going to make women uncomfortable, and how to behave like a human being. This isn't women aren't some magical, mysterious being that men can only hope to one day understand. Women are human beings, just like men. And yes, we have this set of experiences that feeds into our interactions with men, but all it takes is listening to women, and not when a woman like myself talks about the situation that made me uncomfortable and suggests that you not do it, maybe find out more, ask questions of your female friends, ask them how they would feel in these situations, instead of logging on and calling me a bitch.
Right, I agree. So everybody got on your case, including Richard Dawkins, which I do want to talk about, but let's use this as a chance to kind of expand on that. Let me ask this. I mean, it seems to me, I remember the idea of going to conventions. Remember those old David Lodge books like Small World? It was about the whole point of about the Modern Language Association conventions. It's kind of an idea about conventions that people go to them in order to have these sexual interactions, and they're kind of just a cover for that. Because in the modern world, where we can all interact on blogs and on Facebook and on Google Plus and so forth, why ever go anywhere physically? Why do we need to do that? And one reason would be because then we could actually touch people. We could actually have sex with people. That's a reason to go. And if that's not a reason to go, if actually, forget it, guys, that's not going to happen. You're just going to, that just isn't beyond the elevator. Okay, let's nail down that the elevator move was the wrong move. Is it acceptable for males and females to go to intellectual interest-based conventions with the idea that they want to have sex with people or find people that they could have a contact with, physical contact with?
Of course it is.
And if that's okay, then when you look around and try to see who you would like to have sex with, are you sexualizing them and thereby committing a kind of a feminist wrong that you'll never get out of? Or is there a way to do it right? And if there's a way to do it right, people would, because you've really highlighted one way to do it wrong. How's a guy to do it right?
Well, this is the difference between sexual objectification and sexual attraction. Attraction is fine. Yes, be attracted. Flirt with people. Get to know members of the opposite sex. Go have sex. Okay. Objectification is ignoring the other person's desires, ignoring their wants and needs as an individual in order to satisfy your own gratification. And if you're doing that, then don't do that. Don't do that at a conference. Do it at, if you...
Now that's at a very high level of abstraction, right? That's at a very high level. It has to be that you're not about you getting some sex.
Yeah,
you have to care about her.
And that's what I've been trying to say is that, put yourself in the woman's position. Listen to what women are saying. Talk to her like a human being. Everyone that, all of my previous boyfriends that I've met at things like this, have gotten to know me as a person, have sat down and talked with me. That's, if you want to get to know someone, if you're looking for a partner, then for me, that's based on respect and understanding. And we're not going to have those if you ignore everything I've said up until a certain point and then ask me to come back to your hotel room. That's not going to happen. And I mean, the important thing to me is not that we teach men the right way to behave in order so that they might get laid, although that is a nice way to put it if you want to sell it to them. But to me, the important thing is, how do we make a safe environment for women? How do we make women comfortable so they come to our conferences and aren't afraid of getting molested, of getting not just hit on constantly, which is annoying enough, but touched? I mean, I can't tell you how many men in the past have touched me in inappropriate ways without my permission at these conferences. So how do we convince men that they need to stop doing this stuff?
Is there some kind of an idea that at these way male-dominated kinds of conventions like Star Trek this kind of a joke about, the woman at a Star Trek convention or something like that, right?
Right. There's a song.
If you're the woman that goes into that environment, maybe people make some assumptions about you that you actually are there because the sexual ratio is so much in your favor that you're really into that.
Yeah. I think that, when, like I said earlier, that I don't think that there's any more sexism or any more misogyny in the skeptic and atheist communities than in the larger society at whole. I think if you look at any community that is, primarily male, I think you're going to see the exact same problems. So you see them at, comic book conventions and, gaming, look at the, what's that website, like ugly slut whore or whatever. There's a website that collects all of the crap that men send women on Xbox Live.
Right.
Because
so these are socially awkward men. These are men that don't have the best skills. I mean, shouldn't we be a little sympathetic to them? What about their problems?
Yeah, no. I think that if they're socially awkward, then they should try to socialize themselves. They should make the effort to get better.
Let's try to help them. I'm trying to help them.
And I think that, my attempt to help them was by saying quite nicely, don't do this. This is a thing you cannot do.
But now let's turn that around. So then you actually learn something, that this is a thing that you cannot do, that your effort to reach out to them seems to have failed in some aspects because you got a lot of pushback. You got a lot of people reacting. You got a lot of support, but you also got a lot of people reacting very negatively to you, including the very famous, hyper-famous atheist Richard Dawkins, right? So tell us about that part of the story.
Yeah, P.Z. Myers wrote about the incident on his site Pharyngula, which Dawkins reads, apparently, and Dawkins commented on that post, basically saying he was writing from the point of view of a Muslim woman who was saying that, you think my problems are bad with, it was a letter to a Muslim woman. So you think your problems with genital mutilation and whatnot are bad. You should see this poor woman who got hit on in an elevator. And
so he wrote as if he was writing a letter to a woman that he called Muslima. Stop whining, will you? Yes, I know you had your genitals mutilated with a razor blade, and don't tell me again. I know you aren't allowed to drive a car, and you can't leave the house without a male relative, and your husband is allowed to beat you, and you'll be stoned to death if you commit adultery. But stop whining, will you? Think of the suffering your poor American sisters have to put up with, and you're the American sister that had to put up with this terrible man in the elevator. So you were ridiculed for oversensitivity.
Yeah, which I'm sort of glad he did it because you said that it was an effort that failed, but I would say it was 100% successful because we're talking about it now, mostly because Dawkins had the tenacity to leave a blog comment 3 blog comments actually, if you read them, that sound like they were written by a 13-year-old boy. They're terribly written, and they make him sound like an idiot. And he got taken to task on that thread and elsewhere. And now it's a huge topic of conversation. And so, yeah, I'm getting a ton of crap for it. I'm getting, 10 times the rape threats I got before. Right. But, I'll take that. I will take that.
So you really have leveraged your name within this atheist skeptic community because of this big blow up that involved Richard Dawkins. And I mean, in some ways, what are you doing with that? Because, you might in a couple of years look back and think, I could have played that a lot better. You have this immense opportunity because you got catapulted into the public eye over this and got into a vivid relationship with someone who is very famous and now has to deal with the repercussions, whether it's going to hurt his reputation. Are people going to think Richard Dawkins is big old sexist? Is that going to become something that's attached to him now? It's a real interesting internet opportunity because, when you start to Google Richard Dawkins and then your name pops up, and elevator. Did you know that's auto-suggested? But it's an interesting opportunity for you. I would think you might. I've had some similar, I've had some things happen to me where suddenly something goes big, including people who are very oppositional to me, and it's kind of scary. But it's also an opportunity. If you think about, it's kind of like the way the internet works, the way virality on the internet works. What do you do with it? And you have your big opportunity when it's all big. What do you do with it? You might just be trying to restate what you've already said or to control the crazy possible damage to your reputation. Or you might want to go really on the attack and now I can crush Richard Dawkins or anything like that. But, do you spend a lot of time thinking about how to play this moment in your life on the internet?
Well, I certainly don't have any desire to crush Richard Dawkins, and I don't think that would even happen if I wanted it to. To me, the most important thing is to make sure that the issue is the focus. It's not about me. It's not about one incident that happened in an elevator. That's not by far the worst thing that's ever happened to me at a conference. I chose it because I thought it was so obvious. But so to me, the thing to do at this point is to simply move forward into getting people to continue talking about sexism and about getting more women involved in this community, parlaying it into a positive. And I think it is turning into a positive thing, judging by the flood of emails I've received, from women saying thank you for saying this when I couldn't, and from men who say thank you because I didn't think of this before. Am I avoiding reading the negative stuff? Do you think
because
is
I
that
know
even possible?
You like to read the good stuff, and then the bad stuff you might think, I know the bad stuff is over there. I'm not even going to that website.
Really? Is that how you operate? Because that is not.
I feel like I know what they're going to say. I really don't want. I'll just feel upset if I read that. I kind of know what it is.
I really wish my brain worked that way. No, I'm the opposite, and I think that a lot of people are, unfortunately, in that you seek out the negative and obsess over it, and you need 20 positive emails just to make up for one negative.
But no, to take this back to the skepticism about how the mind works and all that stuff we were talking about an hour ago about the magic, how magicians work, how do we react to what the messages we're getting about ourselves, that it takes 20 to 1 for us to believe that there's something good. It's something to be scientific about, to examine and be really aware and scientific about the way something is happening to you on the internet, to really try to see it clearly, but also to deal with it effectively.
It's one of those things that I've just had to deal with over the past few years of getting more and more getting more and more prominent in this community, dealing with the negative, and it's taken a long time for me to sort out, good criticism from idiots, basically. And so it's not an easy thing for me. And so that's why I laugh when you say, are you just ignoring the negative ones because, that I could. But no, this is based on, I believe, a fairly objective count of what's happening in my inbox and also what's happening on prominent blogs in this community. For instance, PZ Myers, Jennifer Willett, Jen McCrate, Amanda Marcotte. These people, Greg Layden, these people are on my side, are publicly on my side. John Rennie, the former editor of Scientific American. And to get these like prominent voices now all talking about this issue, not just talking about my one scenario, but talking about the greater issue of how to make this community more welcoming to women, that is a total win.
Well, but here's what I would say about that. I mean, you were talking about kind of how politics works in people's minds and how do you shape opinion. But it seems to me that among feminist bloggers, you mentioned Amanda Marcotte, the people who read it get really into it, and she goes very far in the way she presents things and becomes unreadable to people who aren't already on that side. And an awful lot of what feminists write on the web, it is off-putting to people who think, it's sexist against men, or you're just saying all men are predators, and there's a kind of a distancing that goes on where people aren't even reading that. And people are saying, American feminists have kind of gone off the deep end, and they're into, licking their wounds over these small things that have happened to them, and they're making themselves irrelevant and unreadable to other people. So I think there is some of that. And even though you got some high-level support there, I think some of those are people that most people won't read and kind of dismiss out of hand because it seems exaggerated. And if we're going to be scientific and skeptical, shouldn't we, even if we care about women's issues, want to shake off this whole feminism as a religion or feminism as an ideology and try to get much closer to what's really true and be scientific about it?
I think that your perceptions of the top feminists are not the same as mine. And, when we talk about Amanda Marcotte, it's not that nobody's listening to her. In fact, huge numbers of people are listening to her.
Yeah, but huge numbers of people don't. But I know some people read her and that she's very popular, and she's writing in a certain kind of polemical style that stokes the people who are into that. But it's not really scientific. It's not designed to talk to people outside of that circle of true believers. So
when
you're saying like
you're calling something not scientific, but without offering any evidence that it's not scientific. There is no science to say that Amanda Marcotte isn't persuasive, and this is a fight that's happened quite often, particularly amongst the atheists, accusing Richard Dawkins and P.Z. Myers of not being persuasive enough, of turning people off with their fire, and I have yet to see any convincing evidence to suggest that that's true. What I do see is them leading the way. I see them stirring the pot so that moderates can come in and then offer another viewpoint that might be more persuasive to the people who weren't persuaded by the fiery people. So, I don't think that there's any science to suggest that these people aren't effective. I think that they are very much effective.
Well, this goes back to the idea about being PR for science as opposed to science. In other words, there's nothing really fiery about scientific analysis, and a lot of people would think of science as something that should be sort of cool and measured and not about polemics at all. But then there's something that's like arguing for science. You're like the PR agent for science, and in that context, you actually can be fiery because you're trying to get attention. At the same time, you may be very off-putting to people who care about religion and have good opinions of religion or care about respecting religion. Might be very put off by the way some atheists present religion and argue against it. And so it's not an effective form of rhetoric for them. It may be effective for some, but not for others. Now, you could say, well, the position is still a good position. It's just that some people who promote the position are speaking to some audiences, and other people can speak to other audiences. So let's say Christopher Hitchens isn't good at arguing to someone who really cares about religion and cares about being respectful to people who are in religions. But he does work very effectively speaking to some other people, and that's perfectly fine. He has a specific role within the sociology of atheists.
Exactly. And I think that that's why we need a number of different approaches in order to get our message out. We need the people who are fiery, we need the moderates, we need all these people working together, because no one voice is going to convince the world that atheists are worth listening to, or that
feminists
skeptics
or the feminists are listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, no, but now you're boycotting. Is the boycott still on? You're boycotting Richard. You're trying to get people to shun Richard Dawkins. Is that is that happening?
No. I wrote a blog post in which, I was getting a ton of emails from people who were telling me that they no longer respected Dawkins as a voice, as a leader in this community, and that they wouldn't be supporting him any longer. And I wrote a post in which I mentioned that and said that I agree. And because I am very choosy about who I give my money and my time and my promotion to, and I don't want to give those things to someone who is dismissive of me and my concerns and the concerns of the women who have this problem in our community. So that's what I said, and that has been twisted to mean that I've organized some sort of massive boycott. I don't care what people do with their money. If people want to buy Richard's books still, I don't think any less of them. I was just at a conference with Richard. I don't think any less of the thousands of people who turned up to hear him speak. I think that he's still has a lot to say about his field of evolutionary biology. I think he has nothing to say, though, to me about feminism or about women's rights or about my own comfort at these conferences.
Well, I think we have a lot more we could say too, but I'm just looking and see that we've gone 10 minutes over the hour mark, so I feel like I have to cut it off just because it'll go too long. People will never be still listening at this part, but it was really interesting talking to you, and I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, Anne. Thank you.
We need to get to an end. Okay, cool, great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.